Pawn Star's guest wanted $35,000 for his rare Nintendo cartridges, and it went as expected. In the heart of Las Vegas, where flashing light and high-stakes gambling dominate the skyline, there exists a modest little pawn shop that has become a cultural phenomenon. Pawn Stars, the hit reality television show centered around the daily dealings at the gold and silver pawn shop, has captivated audiences for over a decade with its mix of history, commerce, and colorful personalities. At the center of it all is Rick Harrison, the sharp-tongued but fair-minded owner who runs the shop alongside his father, Richard Oldman Harrison, and later joined by his son Corey and longtime employee Austin Chumley Russell. Each episode brings in a new wave of characters, some eccentric, some desperate, hopeful, all bringing in items they believe to be valuable. Some are right. Others learn hard lessons about the market value of their possessions. But occasionally, an item comes through those doors that truly tests the knowledge, patience, and negotiation skills of the team. One such occasion involved a guest who walked into the shop carrying a plastic bag filled with old Nintendo cartridges. He wasn't flashy or dramatic. He simply placed them on the counter and made a bold claim. He wanted $35,000 for them. What followed was a classic Pawn Stars momentical parts, suspenseful, educational, and ultimately predictable for anyone familiar with the show's rhythm. The man who entered the shop appeared unassuming. Dressed casually, perhaps in his late 20s or early 30s, he didn't seem like someone trying to pull a fast one. He carried himself with confidence, though not arrogance. As he pulled out the bag of cartridges, Rick leaned forward slightly, intrigued but cautious. "Where'd you get these?" Rick asked, already flipping through the cases. "My dad collected them," the man replied. "He passed away a few years back, and I've been holding on to them ever since." That detail immediately caught Rick's attention. Inheritance items often hold sentimental value, but when brought to a pawn shop, they can also be a gold mine or a dud. Rick glanced at Chumley, who had already begun inspecting the cartridges more closely. Old Man Harrison, seated behind the counter as usual, gave a knowing look. He'd seen this before. The first thing the team noticed was the variety. There were plenty of common titles: Super Mario Bros., Mortal Kombat's Donkey Kong Country. These were popular games in their time, but not particularly rare or valuable unless in pristine condition. However, mixed among the more common titles were a few that caught Chumley's eye. "This one's pretty rare," Chumley said, holding up a copy of Stadium Events. Rick took it from him and nodded. "Yeah, this could be worth something." Stadium Events is widely regarded as one of the rarest Nintendo Entertainment System (NES) cartridges. Originally released by Bandai in 1987, it was quickly recalled and rebranded under Nintendo as World Class Track Meet. Fewer than 200 copies of the original release are believed to exist, making it a holy grail for collectors. Another title that stood out was Rad Racer 2, which is also quite scarce. There was also a sealed copy of Tetris, a game that, while not necessarily rare, commands a premium if still in its original packaging and untouched. But not everything in the collection was valuable. Many of the cartridges showed signs of wear or scratched labels, faded boxes, missing manuals. And while the presence of the original boxes and manuals does add value, most of these were incomplete. Still, the guest remained confident. "I did my research," he said. "I know what these are worth. I want $35,000. Rick raised an eyebrow. That was no small number. Rick never rushes a deal. He listens, assesses, and then counters, not always aggressively, but with precision. "You think they're worth $35,000? Rick asked, leaning back slightly. "I do," the guest replied. "I looked online. Some of these have sold for thousands individually." "That's true," Rick admitted. "But those are usually in perfect condition, with manuals, boxes, and sometimes even grading." Grading is a key factor in collectible video game valuation. Companies like WATA Video Game Authority offer professional grading services, much like coin or comic book grading. A cartridge graded in mid-condition can significantly increase its value. "These aren't graded," Rick pointed out. "And most of them don't have manuals. You know how much that affects the price." The guest hesitated. "I figured they were still valuable." "They are," Rick said, "just not that valuable." To give the guest a better understanding, Rick and Chumley began explaining the nuances of the vintage gaming market. "The market for retro games has gone up a lot in recent years," Rick explained. 10 years ago, nobody cared about this stuff. Now, people are paying big money. But it's not just about rarity, Chumley added. It's about demand. Games that are fun to play or nostalgic for people in their 30s and 40s tend to sell better. They went through each title individually, estimating values based on current market trends. Stadium events could be worth up to $20,000 if graded and in near-mint condition. Rad Racer 2 around $1,500, $2,000 depending on condition. Maybe $1,000, $1,500. Other notable titles, a few $100s each at best. When they tallied it up, the total came nowhere near $35,000. If you had all these graded and in perfect condition, maybe, Rick said. But right now, they're worth about half that. "So you're saying I'm asking too much?" the guest asked, finally realizing the gap between his expectations and the reality. "A little bit," Rick said with a smirk. After going through the entire collection and explaining each valuation point, Rick made his move. "We'll give you $15,000 for the whole lot," he said. The guest blinked. "That's it?" he asked, clearly surprised. "That's it," Rick confirmed. "You take it or leave it." There was silence for a moment. The guest looked down at the pile of cartridges on the counter, clearly weighing his options. "I mean, I was hoping for more," he admitted. Rick shrugged. "So was I when I started this business. But you've got to know your market." Old Man Harrison chimed in from his seat. "Kid, you're lucky you found someone who knows what these things are worth. Most places would give you $5 grand and tell you you're lucky." That hit home. The guest thought for another minute before nodding slowly. "All right," he said. "I'll take the $15,000. Rick smiled. "Good choice." As the transaction was processed, the guest seemed relieved. Perhaps not thrilled with the amount, but satisfied that he got a fair deal. "I guess I didn't realize how much condition mattered," he said. "It's the difference between a collector's item and a used toy," Rick replied. "People pay for perfection." Once the guests left, Rick, Chumley, and Old Man Harrison sat back and reflected on the deal. "He was a nice kid," Old Man said. "Didn't try to rip us off, just didn't know what he had. And that's why we do this," Rick added. "We educate people. We give them a fair shake." Chumley, already organizing the newly acquired games, grinned. "These'll probably sell quick, once we clean them up and list them online." Indeed, within weeks, the cartridges were cleaned, cataloged, and listed on the shop's website and auction platforms. The Stadium Events cartridge ended up selling for nearly $25,000 after being professionally graded and authenticated a tidy profit for the shop. This particular segment struck a chord with fans because it encapsulated so many elements of what makes Pawn Stars compelling. Video games from the NES era evoke strong memories for many viewers, especially those who grew up in the 80s and 90s. The episode provided a crash course in the vintage gaming market, teaching viewers about grading, rarity, and demand. The guest's journey from high hopes to grounded realism was relatable. It reminded viewers that sentimentality doesn't always translate to monetary value. Despite the large price discrepancy, the guest left feeling respected and informed. Rick and his team didn't take advantage. They offered a fair deal based on real market conditions. The Pawn Stars episode, featuring the Nintendo cartridges, reflects a broader trend in pop culture, the resurgence of interest in retro gaming. Over the past decade, the market for vintage video games has exploded. What was once considered obsolete tech has become highly sought-after memorabilia. Collectors, investors, and casual enthusiasts alike are willing to spend serious money on original hardware, games, and accessories. Several factors have contributed to this boom. As millennials age into their 30s and 40s, they seek out the toys and entertainment of their youth. With modern games becoming increasingly complex and digital-only, many gamers are returning to the simplicity of physical cartridges and classic gameplay. Like comics, stamps, or baseball cards, vintage games have become a viable investment. Rare titles regularly sell for tens of thousands of dollars at auctions. Platforms like eBay, heritage auctions, and specialized sites like price charting have helped drive this market, giving buyers and sellers access to real-time pricing data. But as the Pawn Stars episode shows, not all vintage games are created equal. Knowing the difference between a rare treasure and a common title is crucial, and that's where experts like Rick and Chumley come in. For viewers watching at home, this episode served as a valuable lesson in several areas. Just because something is old doesn't mean it's valuable. Research and realistic expectations are key. Whether it's a comic book, a vinyl record, or a video game, the state of the item drastically affects its worth. While it's easy to Google prices, professionals bring experience, context, and authentication to the table. Emotional attachment doesn't always equate to financial gain. Learning to separate the two can prevent disappointment. The story of the guest who walked into the gold and silver pawn shop with a plastic bag full of Nintendo cartridges is, in many ways, the quintessential Pawn Stars moment. It combined history, commerce, and human emotion into a single, engaging narrative. While the guest may have left without the $35,000 he hoped for, he gained something arguably more valuable: an understanding of the collectibles market, and a reminder that sometimes the past holds more than just memories. As for Rick and the gang, they added another notch to their belt: a successful deal, a happy customer, and yet another entertaining episode that kept fans coming back week after week. And that, in the end, is what Pawn Stars is all about.